We currently have a method that allows us to add some balance, or in the case of we passing a negative value to subtract some balance from the balance property. And currently the balance property has a small filter that doesn't allow us to set a negative balance. Maybe there isn't a scenario where we want to set a negative balance to a bank account. Do we change the property that has allowed us to add some security to the balance? Or do we change the current add balance method to now use the balance variable instead of the balance property? Well, we're going to implement a solution that is called method overloading. And method overloading is having different methods that have the same name but a different signature. We have seen something similar when we had two constructors. We had two constructors that of course had the same name, but one of them didn't receive any arguments and the other received two arguments. Let's now overload the add balance method so we have another method that allows us to set negative balance. So we have to define it as public, as float, and as having the same exact number, add balance. And we can define its body. And this add balance method is going to receive a balance to be added as float, but it is also going to receive a boolean whether true or false, as if balance can be negative. So if balance can be negative, we can use the variable instead of the property. If it can't, we can continue to use the property. So let's make the evaluation. If balance can be negative is true, then we're going to set the balance directly to be equal to balance minus balance to be added. Else, we're going to do so through the balance property. And the balance property is going to be equal to balance minus balance to be added. The same thing, but remember that the balance property is going to evaluate if the value is greater or equal than 0. Otherwise, it's just going to set 0. And finally, I can return the balance. And I can do it through the same property because even if the balance was set to negative, the property is always going to return the variable itself. In the get, it's not making any evaluations, it's just returning the variable. The main story here is that we have two methods that are called the exact same way, but that have different signatures. One is only requesting a float, and one is requesting a float plus a boolean. Let's try to use this second add balance method. We're going to head back to the program class and we're going to find the main method. And when we have the calling for the add balance method, let's write this parenthesis again. And notice that the same thing that we had when we had two constructors for the bank account happens. We see inside of Visual Studio that we have two different add balance methods. We only had to write add balance and we have access to all of the methods that are called the same way. All of the overloaded methods. One of them requests a float, another one requests a float and a boolean. And so for example, in the case of the second add balance call from the bank account 2, I can use the second overload, which requires a boolean, and I will set this to true. So this can be negative. And remember that in here we were subtracting a higher value than the one that was set. So the balance should be negative. So let's test this out. And I seem to have made a mistake. Let me take a look at the code of the add balance. And yeah, currently I was subtracting the value. What has to happen in here is an addition. So we are adding the balance, but the balance can be negative. Okay, so let's try this again. I'm going to run the console and notice that now we see the correct value. We have subtracted 1400 from 1300, so we see minus 100. And in this case, the balance can now be negative because we are now performing the operation directly into the variable instead of on the property. So the evaluation, if the value is greater than 0, is not being performed. This was a quick look at overloading methods. In the next lecture, we're going to take a look at inheritance.